Welcome to Lifelong Running, the channel where we help you run smarter, faster, and injury-free. What happens to your body during a marathon? We're going to look today at the biomechanics and the physiology, a little bit with the nutrition of what's happening in your body as you progress through those miles. First off, let's think about the fuel that goes into our body. I'll focus primarily here on the carbohydrates and the fats. When we have a real elite runner, those that are finishing in 2 hours, maybe just a little slower than that, they are excellent at utilizing the carbohydrates that are available in their body really effectively. So as they start running, they'll be using carbohydrate and fat. And as some of those stores gradually deplete, there'll be a little shift in which source we're primarily working on. We'll also notice that as we go with different intensities, the percent of carbohydrate compared to the percent of fat that's utilized is going to vary. Now, the elite runners are going to move through that entire race using a lot of carbohydrate stores really effectively and utilizing the fat that's there also. And they'll be a little less likely to go through that hitting the wall or bonking near the end of the marathon. Those that are running slower through the race are out there for a whole lot more time, and generally they're not as efficient at utilizing the fuels that are available for them. So when they get progressing through the marathon, they'll deplete their carbohydrate stores a lot more and need to replenish those as they go, trying to keep blood glucose up as well as they can by having good nutrition throughout the marathon. So if you're an elite runner or not, then there'll be some different needs in terms of the nutrition that you take in through the race, partly due to the amount of time that you're going to be out there and partly due to your body's effectiveness at utilizing the energy stores that are available. Biomechanically, some things change in your body as you kind of progress through those hours of running. As the body runs, we're going to have muscle damage. There'll be fatigue, and you're not really running in the same body near the end of the marathon compared to how you were at the beginning because you've changed the body through the running. You're going to be lighter, even though you're taking in nutrition fluids as you go. There's a lot of fluid being evaporated through sweat. There'll also be muscle damage occurring. Now, we can prevent some of that through effective training and choosing the right footwear. We have noticed that there's some articles out now that are starting to show less muscle damage when we run in what we call super shoes, and I'm sure some will be more effective than others in that process. So if we preserve our body through nutrition, good training, and the right footwear, then we'll be a lot better off. But there will still be a lot of muscle damage occurring as we go through those races. Now, we'll see that differently in the elite runner compared to slower runners because our bodies are prepared differently. We go through different forces loading the body, different numbers of steps, depending on how we are effectively getting through that race. So let's consider some ideas of what happens to our body and how we might adjust. Just like with what we noticed with the substrate utilization or the fuels that we bring into our body changing differently between elite and slower runners, we also noticed that in biomechanics. We did a study many years ago with Maggie, one of my grad students, where we measured running mechanics early in a marathon and late. I think it was around mile 4 or 5 and then close to mile 21 where the measurements occurred. And after adjusting for the differences in speed and how our mechanics changed for that, we found that the faster runners changed their running mechanics less than the slower runners. Partly, I think, due to them being out there longer and probably some training differences also that had the faster runners a bit more prepared to handle the forces on the body. The main differences we found after accounting for differences in speed from the beginning to end of the race were an increase in stride length, an increase in time on the ground, a smaller amount of knee flexion while the foot is on the ground, a decrease in hip extension, and then increases in knee flexion while the foot is off the ground, tucking the heel up closer to the butt, and an increase in hip flexion during that swing phase as the knee is driving up. So we do start striding longer when we're fatigued, And there's a good reason for that. It ends up being more effective for the current state our body is in. This is not what we classify as overstriding if the reason is muscle fatigue doesn't have you as bouncy in terms of the leg working like a spring on the ground. So the only way to keep speed going is to stride a little bit longer. So we see that more in the slower runners compared to the faster, and it's a normal adjustment to make. Now, if you chose the right pace and you did good training, then we should be having some adjustments because we're putting our body through a pretty traumatic experience. I was going to say physically, but I'd probably also include mentally and maybe in every way that our body responds to stress. But physically, we do have some changes to consider where when we race a marathon really effectively, if we're not pretty beat up at the end, then we didn't race it as fast as we could. If it's causing us to slow down dramatically, then we went too fast early on. So there's those kind of things going on which change how we adjust mechanically as we continue through the race. But we should move a little differently because we've put our body and our muscles through some real strain. Hydration is critical for good performance in the marathon, but we'll also see some differences there between elites and non-elites where we're out there for a different amount of time. So if you have someone that's finishing in 2 hours, a little bit longer than that, then they probably started at a nice friendly temperature. Depends which race you're actually in, but most are starting early morning and they're finishing when it's still relatively comfortable. But if someone's out there for 4 or 5 or however many hours, they might be getting into some heat of the day where it can present some real challenges in terms of keeping the body cool enough, and that requires more fluid. And so we have some real challenges coming up with that. So the idea is to take the start of the race being very well hydrated to begin with, and then taking in the amount of fluids that are effective for you as you progress. Now, the elite runners will typically finish around 2 to 4% underweight under the starting weight of the race, and that is fine. Once they get beyond 4%, there's probably going to start being some performance detriments that are going to come along because of being a bit too dehydrated. And the end result of the race, most of the time they were less than 4% dehydrated in terms of body weight. And so it ends up not being all that bad for them, although they do need to still take in quite a bit of fluid as they go. If you've been out there for a lot longer and exposed to greater temperatures as the race progressed, then it's even more important to make sure enough fluid is getting into your body. Now, it's probably not reasonable to have everyone weighing themselves as they go, but through training runs and experiences, you can start understanding what works best for you under various conditions. During extended running, our heart rate tends to drift upwards. If we maintain the same effort or at least pace, then it starts requiring more and more blood getting to the body or throughout the body to be effective in our running. So we call it cardiovascular drift, where the heart rate just gradually drifts up as the run progresses. This is caused by a loss of plasma volume. We're sweating a lot and so on, and so we lose some of our hydration, and plasma volume goes down, there's less blood, which means we're going to have the heart work harder to get enough blood through our body. We're also increasing temperature typically as the race continues, which means we're going to have some blood needed to the skin, to cooling, and other shifts of blood volume that are going to mean the heart, again, has to work a little bit harder. So what can we do about these things? One is doing some heat training. Maybe it's sauna training. Our group here does anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 days a week, where it's typically around 20 to 35 minutes, depending on who it is and so on, and what the temperature of the sauna is. And that really does seem to make an effect on how well we can handle the heat during performance. We can also do pre-cooling. If you're in a race where it's not necessarily very cool at the start, then an ice vest, carrying bags of ice in your hands as you get in your final preparation can have your body temperature a little cooler to start with, which delays the troubles from having some added heat later on in the race. During a marathon, a lot of proteins in the blood make some adjustments in the body. One of those we call cardiac troponin. It's a marker of strain on the heart. So if someone has a potential heart attack and goes to the hospital, one of the first things they do is measure their blood troponin, check it again a little later and see how it's increasing or not. And I've heard numbers of something like 14, I've forgotten the units they use for it, is where they start really worrying about someone if they show up with some chest pain. Now, we measured in the Boston Marathon a few years ago troponin levels pre-race, post-race, and for a lot of them about an hour after the race. And we saw normal numbers prior to the race, and then saw numbers, some of them even getting up into the 1500s, when 14.0 is where a hospital might start worrying. So it doesn't mean the runners are having a heart attack, but the troponin levels, because of all the strain on the heart, go up very dramatically. So we can measure other proteins that look at cartilage turnover and muscle. We have a study that we're doing with a long run where people are doing 13 to 25 miles, where we're going to start answering some of those questions about markers in the blood and how those change as we run. And that'll hopefully lead to some application of what now can we do about it to have it help our performance while also helping our recovery when the race is complete. So applying what we've learned today, make sure that you do the appropriate training as you prepare, including in strength training and plyometrics, the long run, the workouts, the recovery runs, getting in what you need to have your body in a good state so it doesn't change as dramatically as it would otherwise without that good preparation. Make sure you're nutritionally sound on race day. Get in the right hydration prior to starting, and any other supplementation you need. Maybe it's sodium bicarbonate, maybe it's something with electrolyte formulas, maybe a bit of caffeine, and some calories. Making sure you get something in your body that will sit easily and give you some good glucose stores to help you get started on the race, but also have those depleted later. And during the race, you'll be able to get in some supplementation nutritionally in terms of hydration, electrolytes, carbohydrates, and whatever else might be included there for an effective race for you. With that in place, there'll be less changes in terms of the substrate utilizations that are involved and the changes in your running mechanics. If you choose the right pace, that's the other key, then you'll be able to finish the race with your body in a completely different state than when it started, but not to the point where your performance is severely suffering.